Well, hello again, vinyl community. I'm back, having recovered from that virus I was suffering from last time, so I'm hoping to make a more coherent showing in this video. And I want to start the proceedings out by giving a shout out to a channel I just discovered recently. He's apparently just back to YouTube after a long layoff, and the channel name is MDK1958. MDK, I'm assuming, is a reference to magma, so that gives you an indication that he's very much into prog rock. The fellow's name is Pete, and he's a gentleman from the north of England, and shows some really interesting prog, classic rock and other items, jazz as well. So that's very much worth seeking out. I'll leave a link in the description. He could definitely deserve more viewers. And start showing records with some gentlemen also from the north of England, the Beatles. Now, I've mentioned before that I've got a special attraction to the Beatles albums as they were released in America, the way I remember them from back in the day. And Beatles 65 is one where I've been trying to find the specific pressing I had back in the day, and the clue to that is the gold record seal actually being printed on the record. This is the green label edition from the early 70s, 1969, 1970 period, in between the rainbow label and the Apple reissues that happened in the mid-70s. Beatles 65 is basically part one of the American version of Beatles for Sale. There are 8 tracks from Beatles for Sale. In fact, all of side 1 is the first 6 songs from Beatles for Sale in order. It's also got both sides of the I Feel Fine and She's a Woman single, and the track I'll Be Back, which was a leftover from Hard Day's Night. And the same day I received that, I received another hole filler for my Beatles collection, Beatles 6, which is part 2 of Beatles for Sale. It contains the remaining 6 Beatles for Sale songs, and it also includes several songs that had not even been released in Britain yet. So there are a couple of songs from Help, which had not yet been released. That was the next album after this one. And Bad Boy, which wouldn't be released in England until the collection of Beatles Oldies collection. So when people scorn the US version of Help for only including half of the original British album, they had even already released some of that material that was left off the US Help. So naturally that got left off because it was already on this album, and this is that mid-70s Apple label. Again, that is the version I had back in the day, so I was really pleased to get this in really excellent condition. Triumvirate, Spartacus. This is the 3rd album by the German prog band Triumvirate. Keyboard trio very much in the vein of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. There are some keyboard sounds and gestures here that you'd swear was Keith Emerson. The vocals are not up to the standard of Greg Lake, but you can't have everything. This is definitely worthwhile if you're into that vintage prog rock sound. This is the US copy on Capitol. Apparently there were 2 different editions on Capitol, one with this black inner sleeve, and then apparently at the same time they released another version with the white inner sleeve matching the UK version. And the difference was that instead of having the lyrics printed, it had a photograph, just some kind of art installation. Also from Germany, Cluster. Let's put that right side up. Cluster Collection 06. And this is a compilation on the Bureau B label on white vinyl of music by Cluster, and this goes back to their early days when they were doing very experimental, abstract, electronic studio experiments in the vein of early Tangerine Dream. But they quickly evolved into something a lot more down-to-earth, with simple melodies and breezy percussion or breezy rhythms, more in the vein of Neu and Kraftwerk, but actually less rhythm-driven, more melodic. And this LP, by way of booklet, comes with the same booklet that would come in the CD version. And also on cool colored vinyl, Weather Report, Live in Tokyo. This is a double LP containing the complete concert that was excerpted on the second Weather Report album, I Sing the Body Electric. So it's really cool to have the complete piece. This is, for my money, Weather Report at their early best. Okay, going to move on to 3 albums I received from the Roratorio label. Roratorio is an interesting word because it's a composition by John Cage, and Cage in turn derived it from the writings of James Joyce. It's a word from Finnegan's Wake, and he used it for a piece of music that was derived textually from Finnegan's Wake, according to one of Cage's puzzle kind of strategies. And the first LP is by an old college professor of mine, Pauline Oliveros. From Pauline Oliveros, I first learned to program and use synthesizers. So she was a very formative figure in my musical life. This is not an album of electronic music, though she does appear on one of the... There are 2 versions of the piece on this album. On one of them, she does appear playing the Buchla synthesizer system, but it's primarily a piece for instrumental ensemble, and it's not really a determined score. It's one where people choose notes out of a set of notes to play and are signaled by lights when to change from one section to another and one single note to the grouping of notes. There are 2 performances, one 16-minute version from 1970 and a half-hour version from 1977. The title of the composition, To Valerie Solanas and Marilyn Monroe in Recognition of Their Desperation. Now, Valerie Solanas was the woman who shot Andy Warhol and who founded the Scum Association, the Scum Manifesto for the Society for Cutting Up Men. And Marilyn Monroe wasn't. This album also has Pauline Oliveros on it. This is a trio with Tholem McDonis on piano, Pauline on V accordion, which is an accordion that triggers electronic sounds. So you don't hear the sound of the accordion itself. It's just used to trigger synthesizer modules of some kind. And Nels Klein on guitar. Beautiful cover on this. This is a photomicrograph of algae cells, and the back is E. coli cells. And this is an improvisational work, an album-length improv from 2015. And finally on Roratorio, this issue of Sun Ra recordings from 1968 and 1969. Sun Ra and his Astro Infinity Orchestra, Sun Embassy. Funny how this cover really, to me, resembles the other cover. This is a 2018 release, and it's various configurations of the orchestra from 5 to 10 pieces. Lex Humphreys is on percussion on all the tracks. Marshall Allen is on flute and sax on all the tracks. John Gilmore is on most of them. So, Sun Ra switches from percussion, clavinet, Yamaha organ, clavinet, Space Master, A lot of different sounds. One is the organ accompanied by 3 flutes, clarinet, and percussion. One is just the clavinet accompanied by everybody, 6 people on percussion. So a lot of different configurations. Not what I would consider one of Sun Ra's best albums, but he's always interesting. Now, having touched on the world of the jazz greats, they don't come greater than John Coltrane. I didn't have this one on vinyl before. I don't know how I missed that, but really pleased to have an original copy on the orange Impulse label in really, really nice condition and did not cost a fortune. This was the final John Coltrane album recorded during his lifetime, but not released until after his death. It was the first posthumous release, and it's kind of a move on from the really very aggressive and noisy stuff that he'd been doing in the late part of his life when he was doing albums like Om, or at least recording albums like Om, Live in Seattle, and Meditations. This is much more serene. This is much more the roots of spiritual jazz. It contains a rare recording of Coltrane doing a long piece where he plays entirely flute. I don't know if this is actually the flute that was given to him by Eric Dolphy's family, Eric Dolphy's old flute, but I'm betting it was. The music is, as I say, really much more serene than some of the other late Coltrane, but still highly expressive, as the album title suggests, and the track Expression is the closest. I would put this on a continuum with the Psalm from A Love Supreme. I think this is the flowering of what was planted in that piece. Also on the Impulse label, Ornette Coleman, Ornette at 12. You see him on the cover with his young son DiNardo, who is the drummer for this album. This is something of a companion album to my very favorite Ornette Coleman album, Crisis. Crisis is a quintet with Ornette and DiNardo plus Charlie Hayden on bass, Dewey Redman on sax, and Don Cherry on trumpet. This is a 4-piece minus Don Cherry from 1969, and really wonderful. This is on the red circled Impulse label. Next up, George Lewis solo trombone album. This is what it says on the label, solo trombone, except that he does do overdubbing. So the side 1 is a single 20-minute piece for 3 trombones. And while it does venture at times into abstract territory, he stays mostly with playing trombone in the conventional manner, and does end the album with a solo version of the standard Lush Life. And this is on the Sackville label, with little trombone directly on the label. This was recorded in 1976 and released in 77. And moving on to some albums that I wanted to show last time, but kind of had to cut it short because of not feeling well. This is Oliver Lake, Heavy Spirits from 1975 on the Arista Freedom label. This comes with an endorsement on the back from Anthony Braxton, and you can hear some Anthony Braxton's kind of sound in the first side of this, which is a quintet with Oliver Lake himself, of course, on alto, Olu Dara on trumpet, Stafford James on bass, Victor Lewis on drums, and Donald Smith on piano. And he kicks the proceedings off with a piano statement that reminds me of Cecil Taylor. That's a pretty wild sound. The music on this side, in the way that the trumpet and alto play these naughty angular unison lines. Reminds me of Ornette Coleman or Anthony Braxton. The second side of the album is quite different. The first three pieces have Oliver Lake's saxophone accompanied only by 3 violins. So that's a pretty unique format. This is followed by a solo saxophone piece and finally a trio with Lake joined by Joseph Bowie on trombone, Lester Bowie's brother, and Charles Bobo Shaw on drums for a really manic and wonderful free-ish piece. Also from 1975, and also on the Arista Freedom label, Archie Shepp, There's a Trumpet in My Soul. This is an album-length suite, but it is a game of two halves, because on listening to side one, which is largely vocal, the beginning and ending parts of the side are song-oriented material and more mainstream than I would normally expect from Shepp, and I really wasn't that thrilled with it and was thinking, this may not be a keeper, this may be one that I sell off. Side 2 is great. So side 2 is the more free-sounding material that I would expect from Archie Shepp, and really enjoyed it. This is a promo copy, and also marked on the label, not for sale. Well, I fooled them. I bought it. So there. I showed recently one of the Wildflowers series of the Loft recordings from New York in the mid-70s. Here is Wildflowers 3. This has, on side 1, 2 piano trios, Randy Weston with Alex Blake on bass and Azadine Weston on conga. Very fiery performance from him. And Dave Burrell with Stafford James on bass and Harold White on drums. In between, a piece by Michael Jackson, the other Michael Jackson on guitar, with Oliver Lake on soprano sax and flute, Fred Hopkins on bass and Philip Wilson on drums. Side 2, a piece by Abdullah. I'm not familiar with Abdullah. It's a funky piece with both electric and acoustic bass, accompanying Abdullah's trumpet, Charles Bracken on tenor and soprano, Mashuja, or something resembling that, playing guitar, and Rashid Sinan on drums. And finally, Andrew Cyril and Maono, with Ted Daniel on trumpet, David Ware on tenor, and Lyle Atkinson on bass. On the Douglas label from 1977. Moving briefly onto the classic world, I've shown Penderecki before, and here is the St. Luke Passion, or the Passion and Death of our Lord Jesus Christ according to St. Luke, as it's given here. This is the premiere recording of this work by Polish composer Krzysztof Penderecki. This also contains his famous work, The Threnody to the Victims of Hiroshima. But that cover, the Bearing of the Cross, this is a painting that's attributed to Bosch. In looking it up, I found that it's probably not actually by Bosch, but by one of his followers. But isn't that just a marvelous and grotesque image? You can hear this painting. Jesus himself is pretty much lost in all the tumult and all the hubbub going on in this. This is a piece entirely in Latin, so there's a text printed in here with one page, flip over, with translations. Text is drawn primarily from the Gospel of St. Luke, also from Psalms and Catholic prayer tradition. So that's it. There's actually one other record here. You know how often we will use a record that's not saleable as packing material, and I received one of those the other day, and I thought, this actually looks good. Sarah Vaughan, all-time favorites. So I thought, well, I'll clean this up and have a listen to it. But as the record broke through the wrong side of the sleeve, I could see, oh dear, this is trashed. So I tried cleaning it up, but you know, a first run using a Turgitol solution, no, that did not do the trick. It just had goo that was like bonded with the plastic. So I tried scrubbing it with dishwashing liquid and was able to break through to pure smooth vinyl, but I'm thinking there's no way that's happening in the actual grooves. So sorry, Sarah, that one's a loss. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Check out Pete's channel below, and be well. Talk with you later. Bye-bye for now.